Well, people, we have it. Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury set for August 6th, Madison Square Garden. Let us break down this fight and talk about it. So I want to break this video down into a few key sections. So the first section is, who is to blame for this fight almost getting canceled again? John Fury. He almost had the fight canceled because he and Tyson can't travel due to them not being able to come to America because they have their own legal issues. So, again, I think this happened not because Tommy didn't want to do it, but John didn't want Tommy to do it. And Tommy signed the contract, said, I'll come. They're going to have the press conference next week, so super excited for that. But ultimately, I think, why would Tommy advocate so hard to fight Jake Paul since January, calling him out after he fought in April, and then back out? So I don't think Tommy is the reason why this fight almost didn't happen again. I think it's because of John Fury. I think that Tommy wants this fight, and I think that he's not scared of Jake. It's just a lot of issues going back and forth. And there's two storylines here. Tommy Fury is saying that Jake Paul didn't want to sign the contract a little too late because he didn't want to get VADA testing. And Tommy signed it because of John. And that's why there's been such a delay. So clearly, and I guess we'll get more info and story on these two plot lines at the conference next week. But clearly, both sides had issues with one of the sides' demands. And I'm very interested to see that. And I think that Jake, there's no proof that Jake does steroids. Has Tommy potentially not fighting Jake been because of his father, though? Yeah, so I think both things are true to an extent. But I think both were kind of responsible for why this fight announcement took so long to happen. And that's just my opinion. But I'm sure throughout the next coming weeks and at the press conference, we will get confirmation on and more details on why this fight got delayed, which is, I'm sure, a question that they will ask. I like that they're bringing back Ariel Helwani. I think he's great for this scene, and I'm happy that he's going to be doing the press conference, like Jake said in his video. So I think that ultimately those are the two plot lines. The third section of this is Jake Paul's video on Tommy Fury. I wasn't going to include this, but I thought the video, as much as I don't like him, was pretty much a roast and toasted of Tommy Fury. He went after his personality, he went after his girlfriend, the sketches were cool. It was a pretty good way to promote the fight, and it kind of made you want to root for Jake. Not me personally, but if people who don't like Jake would be like, wow, you want the underdog to beat the odds and upset everyone. What does this mean for Jake Paul's overall boxing career and the YouTube boxing scene? It means a lot of things. If Jake Paul wins this fight, it changes the game. It's a game-changing fight. Same thing with McBroom and Gibb on the second-tier level of YouTube boxing. If Jake wins this fight, it will be the first YouTuber to beat a real boxer. The first YouTuber to probably knock out a YouTuber. The first YouTuber to KO a boxer. And it will make the KSI versus Jake Paul fight almost unattainable for KSI. Because Jake will be at this completely different level. And even if Jake Paul outboxes Tommy for a split second, or sets up Tommy, or even lands that lucky shot, KSI's going to have a long way to go to fight Jake. And the only way I see KSI v Jake happening is KSI beating Tommy and doing it better than Jake. That's the only way I see that fight happening. And even if Jake beats Tommy, I'll still say KSI can beat Jake. But I'm realistic. It's very low, though. It's still pretty low right now, but it will be even lower, almost unattainable, if Jake beats Tommy. It's almost unattainable for KSI. And again, that's KSI's fault for coming back to boxing maybe a little too late. But I think we will see that fight happen. Now, if Jake beats Tommy, but loses to KSI, that's not good. Because you beat a real boxer, but then you weren't able to beat KSI. If anything, I think Jake's ideal plan is to lose to Tommy and beat KSI and make the comeback that way. Because that's a much better path. Because if he loses to Tommy, he's not going to get embarrassed or KO'd. People will expect it. He can still make the KSI and Jake fight happen. The YouTube fans will be interested. It'll still make a ton of money. It will be the return fight for Jake Paul. And if KSI gives Jake work and Jake still beats him, the boxing community will get respect back for Jake, and he will be able to move on. But either way, it's a lose-lose for Jake, because if he beats Tommy and then he loses to KSI, it's a big L. If he loses to Tommy, if he loses to Tommy and then loses to Jake, his career is over at that point. Tommy Fury should beat Jake Paul. He is the same height, same weight, is the same age, is as hungry, talks and is as passionate about boxing as Jake, something that his past opponents have not had. He's not 40 years old, past his prime, lost all these fights, has a weak mentality, he's fresh, he's young. The way that he talks is the way that Jake talks. You know, Tyron Woodley didn't talk the way Jake talked about the fight, which just goes to show that I think Tommy wants it more and is coming to win. Whereas Tyron and Ben and Nate were doing this for a paycheck. I also think that Tommy has 10 plus years of experience. He's going to be at an advantage. Jake's going to be the one at a disadvantage. Whereas in all of the other fights, minus Gibbon, Deji, his last 3 fights, he's had the boxing experience advantage, which I think is why he's won those fights. And again, this whole thing of Jake needs to fight a boxer, Jake needs to fight a boxer. I've been saying that, but at this point, what the conversation should have been is we want Jake to fight somebody that has had the same amount of experience or more. Because that makes it fair. That's what makes the other fights unfair. Because those fights of Tyron and Nate, Ben, they were set up to lose. They were set up to lose because they didn't have enough experience and it was unfair. And I've gone over this before, but what it boils down to is Tyron and Ben, and this is a great angle that Jake has done. He's made this perception, and why people think this fight is so close when it maybe in reality isn't, is because Jake has fought Ben and Tyron, 2 guys that have this. When people think of Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley, they think, wow, these guys are hard. These guys are real, mother effers. They're tough. They're great. But hey, their talents lie in the octagon, in grappling, in wrestling. But Jake knows that they have those viral moments that he'll understand. He understood that by being these 2 guys, he gains a lot of respect without having to do the hard work and actually prove himself. Because the perception of Jake versus the reality is very different. The reality of the situation is Jake beat 2 guys that were not who we perceived them as. They were no longer the Tyron and Ben that we knew. And that might have ever been. And when you think about it, Ben Askren was a terrible journeyman fighter, basically. Tyron Woodley, people give him a lot of credit, and you should. But Tyron Woodley was a punching bag. You know why Jake says that Tyron Woodley is an easier fight? Because he's like, he takes my punches, he doesn't go down, it goes 8 rounds, and I win. Tommy Fury's not going to do that. Tommy Fury's going to have combinations. Tommy Fury's going to have better head movement, better footwork. He's going to jab. He's actually going to know the game and do more advanced stuff that Woodley wouldn't know how to do. He's not going to go like this. He's not going to use this UFC stance. He's not going to do any of that. And so this fight is going to be harder. And I think the perception of Tommy versus the reality of Tommy is very different. Perception, he's weak. He's going to fold under the pressure. Yada, yada, yada. We've heard this. Reality, he's proven himself to do well on a big stage in this last fight. He will do well. He's better than people think he is. And I don't think people are giving him enough credit and enough belief. Because Tommy Fury can and should and will win this fight. However, just like Deontay Wilder, Jake Paul could land that lucky shot. So, I think Tommy's going to win, but I almost kind of don't want him to. Because then we won't get KSI v. Jake. Or we might get it later on. Or Jake's going to beat Tommy, but then he'll lose to KSI. And ultimately, do you think that the universe is going to have Jake Paul lose to Tommy Fury or to KSI? You've all been conned, and he's used angles, and he's done it very well. And because of that, we call this fight 50-50. Because we don't know truly what Jake Paul is made of. And we're going to find out this August. And he has proven himself with the Woodley fight, sure. But he has not proven himself to the fullest extent. And because of that angle, even I can't say that Jake has a 40-60. Because I think this is a 50-50. Because he's used these angles of these tough UFC fighters that take big punches from monsters. And he beat them. The YouTuber beat them. But on the other hand, that YouTuber had more boxing experience and put them at a huge disadvantage. And what would it be like if they actually had the same amount of experience as Jake? And again, reality and perception are 2 very different things. Reality is, Jake Paul has fought mostly bums, Tyron Woodley being the exception. Him and Tommy have had pretty similar careers. They haven't really one-upped each other. This is a tough fight for both of them. This is their toughest fight. I think I preach facts.